Today, we're diving into one of the most controversial stories from 19th century America, but we're going to look at it through a totally unexpected lens: modern archaeology. We're going to investigate this incredible idea of the archive in the earth, this ancient human desire to bury sacred records, and see how it sheds a whole new light on a very, very old claim.
So, picture this. It's the 1830s. A young man, Joseph Smith, comes forward with an unbelievable story about a discovery in upstate New York. And the educated world? Well, they pretty much laughed. To them, it just sounded like a wild myth, a total fantasy that had nothing to do with the real ancient world of, marble statues and papyrus scrolls.
I mean, the details themselves just sounded nuts. A book made of gold? Seriously? Held together with rings? And it was preserved in a stone box buried in a hill? For the rational, scientific minds of the time, every single one of these details was just more proof that the whole thing was made up. It just didn't fit with anything they knew about history.
And that, right there, is our big question for today. We're going to set aside the whole religious debate. We're not touching it. Instead, we're putting on our archaeological detective hats. We're not here to investigate divinity. We're here to investigate physical plausibility. Is it possible that any of these seemingly fantastical elements actually have a precedent in the ancient world?
Okay, so let's start with our very first clue, the medium itself. Why on earth would any ancient culture choose to write on something as difficult and as crazy expensive as metal plates?
Well, it turns out that in the ancient world, the material you wrote on was a huge statement. It's this idea we might call the theology of materiality. See, you'd use something like papyrus for everyday stuff, for things you needed right now. But if your words were meant to last forever, if you wanted to speak across the ages to eternity, you chose gold.
And here's the thing. This isn't just some abstract theory. Not at all. In 1964, archaeologists digging in Italy found these, the Pyrgi Tablets, 3 actual sheets of gold dating all the way back to 500 BC. And this find just perfectly illustrates the point. I mean, look at this. We have a confirmed discovery of thin gold leaves. They're inscribed with a sacred text, a temple dedication, and they were intentionally buried to keep them safe. It's a physical record of a sacred promise, meant to endure forever. The parallels to that 1827 story are, well, they're pretty hard to ignore.
All right, let's move on to our second clue, because this is where it starts to build. The critics back then didn't just scoff at the plates. They made fun of the container, too. A stone box? Come on, that sounds like something you'd cook up in a campfire story, right? But was it?
Turns out, not so much. In the 1930s, at Persepolis, the ancient capital of Persia, archaeologists found something incredible. Right under the foundations of a massive palace, they uncovered stone boxes. And what was inside them? You guessed it, gold and silver plates, inscribed by none other than King Darius the Great.
And this is the crucial point. These weren't just simple boxes. They were a sophisticated piece of technology called a foundation deposit. The thinking was, by placing the king's sacred words in what's been called a lithic womb, a womb of stone, he was symbolically tying his kingdom to the heavens, making sure his legacy would last forever.
And get this wasn't just happening in the old world. Right in the heart of the Aztec Empire, at the Templo Mayor in what's now Mexico City, archaeologists have unearthed over 100 of these stone cash boxes. They weren't tombs for people. They were for sacred offerings, sealed away for the gods.
So it becomes pretty clear that the stone box wasn't some weird anomaly. It was part of a widespread ancient tradition. It was a known technology for the ritual of hiding up something sacred, of preserving its holiness until it was meant to be found again.
Okay, let's move on to our third and final clue. And honestly, this one might be the biggest. It tackles the most practical, persistent criticism of the whole story, the sheer, back-breaking weight of a book made out of solid gold.
I mean, let's just do the basic physics here. If those plates were made of pure, solid gold, they would have weighed somewhere around 200 pounds. That's a massive problem for the story. There's just no way a single person could carry that, let alone run through the woods with it. It just seems physically impossible.
But what if they weren't pure gold? And this, my friends, is the big aha moment of our whole investigation. Let me introduce you to tumbaga, a super clever metal alloy used all over the ancient Americas.
Tumbaga is like the perfect ancient hack. It brilliantly solves every single practical problem.
First, it's way lighter than pure gold. It's also harder, which makes it a much better surface for detailed engraving. But here's the genius part. If you wash it with a weak acid, like say citrus juice, the copper on the surface dissolves away, leaving this beautiful shimmering layer of pure gold. So you get the appearance of gold, which matches what witnesses described, while completely solving the impossible weight problem.
So, after looking at these three clues, the medium, the container, and the material, what's the final verdict? How plausible are the physical claims made back in 1827?
Well, the archaeological evidence definitely moves the needle, and it moves it a lot. Each one of those elements that was once dismissed as a frontier fantasy turns out to have a pretty plausible precedent in the real archaeological record. Writing on metal for eternity? That was a real thing. Using stone boxes to preserve sacred records? A known technology. And an ancient American alloy that solves the weight problem? It absolutely exists.
You know, this impulse to use metal for your most important records just keeps popping up. Take the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. Almost all of them are on leather or papyrus. But there was one massive exception, the copper scroll. When the information, in this case basically a treasure map, was considered too vital to be lost to time and decay, they didn't take any chances. They hammered it right into metal.
And that really gets to the heart of all this, doesn't it? This isn't just about one specific story. What we're really looking at is a chapter in the global history of human devotion. From ancient Persia to Aztec Mexico to the caves of Qumran, you find this same powerful, universal desire to entrust your most sacred message to the earth itself, hoping, praying, it will survive the silence of the grave and speak to the future.
Now, let's be super clear here. None of this proves the divinity of any religious claim. That was never the goal of this investigation. What archaeology does do is remove that old barrier of impossibility. It shows us that the physical details of the story, the very things that were once the easiest targets for mockery, actually fit quite comfortably within a broad and very authentic ancient tradition.
And that kind of leaves us with a final, fascinating thought. History isn't set in stone. What seems impossible to one generation might just be undiscovered to the next. As we keep digging, literally and figuratively, we're constantly forced to rethink what we thought we knew about the past. It just makes you wonder, what other secrets is the Earth still waiting to tell us?